Welcome to B-Flow Sessions, the podcast where we help you find and stay in the flow on the water and in life. I'm your host, Brad Burton. Join me as I sit down with paddlers, athletes, and adventurers who are all seeking the flow. B-Flow Sessions is brought to you by our friends at Pucon Kayak Retreat. Are you dreaming of a Chilean whitewater escape this winter? Picture turquoise rapids, warm sunny days, and world-class rivers for every skill level, all based out of a riverside retreat built by paddlers for paddlers. If that sounds like your kind of winter, then Pucon Kayak Retreat is the place. To learn more or to book your dream kayak trip, reach out to me directly at bflowkayak@gmail.com and I'll help you get connected. B-Flow Sessions is powered by Dagger Kayaks. Wherever there's water, Dagger Kayaks will help you find your flow. Team-tested, paddler-proven designs for all paddlers and all water. And thanks to our partners at Sawyer Paddles, Stohlquist PFDs, and Level 6 Gear for keeping us in the flow. Welcome to the next episode of B-Flow Sessions. I'm your host, Brad Burton, and I am joined by one of the premier kayakers of all time, somebody who was one of the best freestyle paddlers, also expedition, creeking, you name it, big waterfalls, an icon of that late 90s through middle 2000s, but then continued on well after I left the sport and still is a premier feature in the sport. Tyler Curtis. Tyler, welcome to B-Flow Sessions.
Right on, right on. Hey there, friends, folks, and fellow whitewater lovers. Super stoked to be, a part of what's going on here, Brad. Hit me up with some questions. Let's do this.
Yeah, Tyler and I think we first met on the Food maybe the winter of 2000, and he became quite the expert on the Food, went on to write some guidebooks about Chile and the Food, but he's an 8-time national Canadian champion. If you couldn't tell by that accent there, he is Canadian, folks. But also 2-time Norwegian national champion and 2-time Nordic champion, and just went on to do all kinds of amazing things in whitewater that we're going to hear all about. So Tyler, how did you find your flow in kayaking?
Yeah, my flow. I guess my flow started at a pretty early age. My parents were always pretty supportive of letting me get after whatever kind of I wanted to get into, whatever mischief I wanted to get into. And my mom was actually an accountant at a local rafting company on the Ottawa River. Back then it was called River Run. And there was a couple guys that worked there. One guy named Dan Norman and another guy named Peter Knorr, who were part of the Canadian national slalom team. And when I was, I guess, about, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, they took me under their wing, and Dan Norman actually put me into the front of a C2 kayak, slalom boat there, and he had to like duct tape me in and all that fun stuff because I didn't really fit in any of the gear back then. And he took me out for a little paddle at a rapid called Little Picky, which is actually where I've kind of built my home. So that was kind of my first intro to, my backyard of the Ottawa River. Like I grew up in the little town of Beachburg, which is about 7 kilometers from the put-in. So I guess that experience of just seeing what was available in my backyard kind of opened my eyes up big time to how luxury it is to actually live on the Ottawa River or near the Ottawa. I guess kind of from that point on, I managed to get into a job with Wilderness Tours as like a dishwasher, busboy, maintenance, sweeping and mopping and all that fun stuff in order to work enough to kind of pay off buying a kayak. And the rest was kind of, history. The with Wilderness Tours, I guess it was quite good because there's a lot of good people there, a lot of influence in their history, and kayaking goes way back too. So I had some good people to kind of mentor me and show me a whitewater roll and sort of take me under their wing to get me down the river and on the river. One was Benoit Gauthier, and then another fellow named Perry McGregor. So when I was, I guess, about 11 years old is when I kind of learned how to roll and then just started to make my way on the river every day.
Wow. And, you mentioned growing up on the Ottawa, and I was thinking about you as we were preparing for this. There's kind of like a few hot spots around North America. If you think about like Andrew Holcomb growing up on the banks of the Nantahala, or people growing up in the DC area that get into slalom, or that Golly area, or Russ Sturgis growing up on the banks of the Salmon. There's so many paddlers who have come out of like growing up in that Ottawa region. I mean, for good reason. But talk about that, just like yourself growing up there, but like it's a real hotbed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, things have changed a little bit over the years. Like when I was really, really little, Beachburg, this little town I grew up in, was kind of a farming-ish community. So the mentality was kind of more or less of stay away from the river. It's dangerous down there. You could kind of drown. But
Right.
then this kind of people who showed me the river kind of enlightened me a bunch. And over time with the Ottawa River hosting kayaking events and world championships and such, that that the things have changed quite a lot now. Like now they call it like the whitewater region. It's big tourist money that rolls into the Ottawa River every summer, and more or less I think any person that wants to call themselves a legit kayaker at some point makes the journey to the Ottawa River. It's produced a ton of kind of world class whitewater kayakers and a lot of people that are world renowned still. Like we have like Nick Troutman, who was born and raised in Beachburg as well. We have Joel Kowalski, Caleb Grady. It's just the list is kind of enormous of how many people. And if you even look back at like the history and the beginnings of the radical design of freestyle kayaks, like the testing ground was, everybody from the Southeast United States and from Europe and all over the world would come to the Ottawa River to test out their new products and sort of see what level they were at or test their abilities against what had kind of happened over the whole entire year. So I think there's a lot of change and positive change that's happened in the area that kayakers and kayaking in general in the Ottawa River and the Ottawa River Valley is very respected now, and draws in a lot of people that want to potentially move there or at least spend summer months there.
I know I always spent a few weeks there. It was the team trials of like 2002. I think the United States had I think we had like a joint team trials, if you remember that. And I came up for that with Andrew Holcomb, and just blown away, of course, by the river, but also just the whole community of the people there. And you know, there's a thing called Southern hospitality, and I know you've spent a lot of time in the South, and I think maybe that may be a little overhyped, because if you want to find nice people, you just keep moving north. You skip over New York, of course, and then you get into Canada, and it's like the nicest, most welcoming people on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's a fantastic place, and it's kind of interesting. Like back in, I guess I could call it the good old days or whatever. But back in the earlier days, it was often felt like we were in our own little kind of bubble up there on the Ottawa River, and there wasn't the social media that there is today to kind of keep tabs of what's going on. So it was always this, amazing stoke feeling that the kind of end of summer was coming, when we knew all the kind of athletes and all the people that were hardcore paddlers were going to wander and meander up to the Great White North and the Ottawa River, and we would be able to sort of, I guess, test ourselves against the best of the best that have come from the rest of the world to where we are, which was I guess the kind of beginnings of the influence of kind of big game kayaking. When that started to happen, I feel like, it wasn't too long before the kind of tides changed a little bit. Instead of us being in the bubble and everybody coming there and we learning from them, it was a lot of people migrating up to the Ottawa in late summer and having big eyeballs and feeling the wow of seeing what we've kind of come up with, some new tricks, or dropping into new giant features, or you know the beginnings of Greyhound bus eater and surfing the bus and the fantastic carburetor and stuff like that. So yeah, it was quite the ride to kind of see the evolution of kayaking here on the Ottawa River.
It's interesting you mentioned kind of pre-internet and social, especially pre-social media.
these pockets of the country or the world that I mentioned, it's not like today where you could dial up YouTube and see somebody doing a loop or doing a tricky woo. And it's like, okay, I'm going to watch it over and over and again to learn that. You either learned it because somebody showed up in your region who was already doing it, or a lot of times people were figuring out the same moves kind of independently of each other. And then showing up and like, oh, you can do that move too. Yeah, I learned how to do it, at guard. Well, I learned how to do it at hell hole or whatever. So it was kind of neat how the sport grew, and ideas and moves and tricks and designs were shared even before social media.
Yeah, a lot of it was the sitting down and watching films, or you'd have, a group of us would go down to the Golly Festival and showcase some of the footage that we'd created over the summer, and in return be able to see some of the footage that happened, and sharing the same tricks that we've all been working on with potentially different names of them or whatever. But yeah, just that evolution I think was pretty amazing. That I think the one big thing that really, or at least I felt like was the game changer for myself personally, was when we actually started to film. Like, we'd spent a long time, from the early ages of my kayaking. I started to teach kayaking right away, so that was one kind of good way to hone your skills, is be always kind of teaching it out. But then we started to do, with Ken Whiting, and started to do some of these videos where we were actually, had somebody like Chris Emmerich, filming on a daily basis, and we'd come back at the end of the day and edit through all the video footage and really analyze what our bodies were doing, and how we were placing the boats, and what kind of edging and the leverage we were using, and how we could maybe, get rid of twist on the paddle to make things more efficient. And I think that really helped to kind of escalate how fast that we could progress in freestyle, and start to come up with new tricks, new techniques, and everybody start to create kind of their own style in freestyle.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely the region that you live in, I think, lends it to its style, right? I mean, obviously, big wave surfing and big hole in throwing is definitely going to lend itself to you folks growing up on the Ottawa.
Yeah, we were, I guess, quite spoiled of just having, at every water level, from spring flood to low water fall, like there's always something to surf, and there's always kind of fun to be had at whatever kind of water level. I think that also really helped when you start to move into the kind of the freestyle competition scene as well. That it was, I always felt like it was not that difficult to really go to a new location and suss out and sort out the feature kind of quickly, because we have so many different features on the Ottawa River. You could quickly sort
Yeah,
of hone into a new feature because it had some sort of similarity to something that we surf often, versus,
sure.
nowadays, that people that sit and train at just one feature over and over and over again, you take them to a different feature and they spend a bunch more time kind of struggling to try to figure out a new feature.
I just got back from Columbus, Georgia, and of course that wasn't a thing whenever I was first paddling in the 90s and 2000s, but now it kind of reminds me of like a southern version of Ottawa. Of course, it's pretty big water, especially for the southeast, pretty big volume, and you've got like this community kind of either that was already there and started paddling. Like the Hargrove family is like from Columbus, and now Mason and his sisters are some of the best paddlers in the world, or people are migrating there. It kind of reminds me again a little bit bigger city probably, but than Beech Grove. But obviously the city of Ottawa is big, but you know what I mean. But that just having a city right there that people are gravitating towards, it kind of reminds me of the Ottawa.
Yeah, definitely. You're even seeing a bunch of the people that are camping out on the Ottawa for the summer, doing their wintering grounds down there in Columbus as well. Like, I've
Okay.
I've actually yet to paddle down there, which is, shameful. I keep promising Stephen Wright that I'm gonna pay him a visit down there at some point, and do some paddling. But that place looks fantastic, just that they have, so many different features, and the water level is always varying a little bit, so it keeps things a little bit interesting as well. Yeah, definitely very similar to Ottawa River style fun.
Yeah, it definitely, just like I said, the community and people growing up and becoming world class paddlers who grew up there. It definitely reminded me of the Ottawa. So, Tyler, take us through a time that you would call perfect flow, a day, a river, a rapid, a competition, something that just everything clicked and it was just the most perfect flow day for you.
Wow, I've had certainly a number of those ones, I would imagine. And those perfect days of over time kind of evolved, I think, as well. Um, I guess I can go back to the beginnings when you're competing and having this time in a feature training and finally producing the ride that you want to kind of produce and coming away with victory or something. There was definitely some of those highlight moments, but I think a couple of them, um, I guess there's definitely a couple of them. I guess I could, if I go from kind of the beginnings in that freestyle world to like the now times, is like I've had definitely some of my better days now with my little kiddos. I have two kids that are starting to really want to kayak a little bit more. So just getting out early in the morning or after dinner as the kind of sun goes down on the Ottawa River when it's super warm waters and just kind of letting my kids lead the way and go find trouble and kind of follow them into whatever it is that they want to get into has been, you know, dozens of magical days um, doing that. But I think probably one of the big highlight glory magical flow days was probably the first time when I did uh, a full run of the Food LeFou actually, where you get a perfect flow where you can make the whole run down, run Zeta Rapid, um, like just running everything and never having to get out of your boat. And I think that that was I remember one glorious sunny day. I spent a bunch of years down on the Food LeFou, probably 10, 12 years every winter down there guiding people and just playing my brains out on the Food LeFou, which is a magical river, as you know as well. But it had always been like you come to certain rapids and you need to get out of your kayak and you need to scout it and work up the courage and set up the safety and whatever to run something like Zeta or Throne Room. Maybe some days you didn't really feel the flow to go run Throne, or Terminator was too big or whatever. But I just remember one of those days where it was like wind still, the water level was kind of on towards low end, so it's that crystal color, and just being able to put in the town of Food LeFou and paddle the whole way down to pretty much Lago Yelcho, where everything kind of just dumps out into the flats, and accomplish that in one day was I think one of my bigger kind of highlight days of getting after kayaking and feeling like you're on top of the world.
I bet you packed an empanada and a dry bag to eat.
Definitely empanadas on in the good thing with starting in Food LeFou, because most of the time I live down with the at the Cerro de Indio there with the Toro family. But starting off up in Food LeFou, you can definitely pack a bag full of treats and goodies and chocolates and all that sort of stuff to make it the day of all days.
Nothing hits like a Chilean empanada. You find those Argentine styles throughout Central America, throughout North America. In Chile, specifically in southern Chile, is the only place I've found those big Chilean empanadas with like gravy and meat and potatoes and olives and man,
Yeah,
nothing hits like
those
that.
things are magic. They're magic for sure. And you can, you know what I mean? You pack them warm in your dry bag in the beginning of the day, and it doesn't matter if you forget it there. You can still break it out once the sun goes down, and it's still
Still
delicious.
good cold. It's still good cold. Yeah. I did have mate though once I came back from the Fuda and it was just different. Mate did not hit the same without that water. So I'm afraid a Chilean empanada may not taste as good as it does on the banks of the Fuda.
That is true. It's not something you can make back home, I don't think.
No, definitely got to get back down there and have me one for sure.
Yeah, I haven't been there in 10 years, I guess now. So, I've had a couple recent telephone calls with some friends here over the winter and last summer, and the talks are rumbling a little bit that a Foodle-a-Foo return is kind of in order. I think I'd be pretty shocked to go down there now to just to see the development that's happened down there. But
Yeah.
I think it would be kind of interesting to go check it out and then just relive some of those highlight reel moments of life down on the Fuda.
My wife and I are both teachers, and we have a 2 week Christmas break, and we're going to see my good friend Dave Hughes. I'm sure you know Dave as well, and we're going to visit him at Pucon Kayak Retreat for a week. And I'm like, we only have another week off. Can we make it down to the Fuda with the time we have? And I'm debating.
Yeah, might be worth it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like it's right there, but it's not right there, as you know. Like, but man, you're so close.
Yeah, exactly. It's always an
Yeah.
adventure in
Well,
Chile.
well, take us through a time the opposite of perfect flow. I call it flood, and I don't mean flood in a good way. I'm talking like a time when things did not go well, and maybe you were out of control. And obviously, it came out okay because you're here talking to us, but it may have been a scary situation.
Yeah, the flood. I'm a big water boater, so I kind of like the flood, but I've definitely had some I guess too much water. Yeah, I've had actually two pretty major injuries in the kayaking scene here. I guess one of the biggest one was in 2001. As you know, the Worlds was in Sort, Spain, and the feature at that year's Worlds was very, very similar to kind of right side horseshoe there at McCoy's Chute, which is kind of my backyard and stomping ground. So I think, or I like to think, I guess at least that a lot of people had hopes that that was kind of maybe the Worlds that I might actually take home a medal. Um, and so I previous to that had been boating a whole lot, and with a group of buddies went up to way northern Ontario, like Thunder Bay, and even further up towards Armstrong, and we did a bunch of exploring up there with some float planes. Did a bunch of amazing first descent sections of some rivers up there. But on the second last day of our trip up there, we decided to go back and rally a kind of gnarly, not really a waterfall, but just a chaotic kind of rapid. There was this kind of slidey kind of rapid, and as it kind of, fairly steep, and then it kind of flattened out a little bit and went kind of, all the water got squeezed between these two kind of tombstone looking kind of rocks that splatter water all over the place, and then it kind of plunged through a bit of a hole and then off of maybe a 25 foot drop, like a scenic looking rapid that looked, not crazy heinous, but a little bit sporty. And I managed to, win the paper rock scissors and get to go run first. So I kind of guess the human factors of just not paying attention, or that familiarity of just having high expectations and nothing's going to go wrong. I kind of plowed into the rapid, and then just between the two kind of tombstone rocks was a little bit of a finger rock that kind of nipped me in the butt there underneath my boat and flipped me to my left, and I went to brace and caught the tombstone rock with
Mm.
my left arm, which dislocated my shoulder. I got pretty lucky though, because as I went into the hole that was kind of behind that, the hole rolled me up and lined me up pretty good to go over the waterfall, and all I kind of just tucked my body inwards and plugged the
Oh,
waterfall and came up right side up, and kind of went to was kind of shocked, like, wow, didn't really realize what had happened. But when I went to take a big stroke to go for shore, I was like, wow, there's something totally wrong here. And kind of crimp my way into shore, and I was with Brendan Mark, actually, a good friend and fellow paddler. And he was kind of there looking at me, like giving me the "Are you okay?" Bumping his helmet, and I was like, "No, something's totally wrong." And I got over, and I couldn't really lift my arm and it hurt a lot. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I've dislocated my shoulder. So I, was, I don't know that I guess if you listen to your body enough, it just your shoulder doesn't want to be out of the joint and out of the socket at all. So I just kind of grabbed the front of my cockpit rim and leaned myself back, and it popped itself back in. Um,
Mm.
Luckily, then we ended up, we had a few more rapids to kind of run the rest of the trip. We ran the rest of the rivers out there. And that was kind of it for the rest of that trip. And I went to go see a doctor who had told me I needed to go get some x-rays. So I went to get some x-rays, and they told me I needed to go get myself uh, an MRI, but it was really, really close to kind of the world's and such. So I kind of took the 2 weeks before the Worlds off and didn't kayak at all. Flew myself all the way to the Worlds, or I guess I can say I flew myself. But luckily in those days we had sponsors to pay airplane tickets. But I landed myself in Sort, Spain for the Worlds, and the first day I was too nervous to kind of kayak, and I had a couple more training days, so finally, I guess one of the first team training times, I went out and went to go for a ride, and I did 2 rides and was more or less in tears. My shoulder hurt so bad,
Mm.
so I ended up having to give up my spot at the Worlds to Kevin Verrett, who went and competed for me, and I got to sit there and watch and announce while everybody else got to take rides in the hole that was
Mm.
built for me. So that was a bit of a bummer. I went home after the event and had an MRI and ended up going in and having my labrum fixed in my shoulder. And then after that, I guess I haven't really had any problems since. I did a pretty good comeback, but that's a whole other story in itself, I guess. So that was kind of my one,
Yeah.
I guess, the one big, the one big, I guess, terrible out of control flood that I had in life. The other one
Right.
is I had one other one too on the Chute de Chaudière. It was about 3 years later, I guess, in 2004. I ended up running the Chute de Chaudière with Steve Fisher. So we were on a bit of a photo shoot with Men's Journal. Looked at a pretty crazy big waterfall in Quebec City, and we'd looked at it for kind of 2 days in a row, and we're hemming and hawing a whole lot. And on the second day, decided that it was pretty good to go. Figured out what timing to kind of go and be there to take the kind of shots and stuff. And then the morning that we showed up there, it had dropped. The water level had dropped probably 2 inches of water, and it was kind of a little bit bony. But yeah, we decided to make a run of it anyways, and the run is kind of interesting. There's like a big weir kind of low head dam that water kind of spills over, and it divides this big wide rapid into a bunch of different channels. And so we run one of the farthest river right channel. And Steve kind of paper rock scissors, and Steve won out. So he went off first, and when he left the lip of this thing, it was a bit of a slide into a kind of a little pool, and then the lip into this big waterfall. I think it's probably 80-85 footer, something like quite large. And when he came, he went down the slide, kind of hit the little pool, and when he left the lip of the falls, he had like got kicked pretty enormously and left the thing flat and pointed towards
Mm.
the right. And I kind of watched him disappear from the top with big wide eyes, being like, "Oh my gosh, I think he just spoofed and was going to land flat a ginormous 80-foot waterfall."
Oh.
But he managed to clip his stern halfway down, which straightened him up and had a really good run actually. So over the radio, he'd sort of told me like, "Come on, don't be pointed so far right. You maybe want to take a little bit more speed." So I, you know, was fully committed at that point as well, even from the night before. So I peeled out into the thing, started down the big long slide, and then kind of hit the pool. And as I hit the pool, it kind of like more or less skipped me. And these were older boats back then. I think I was in a diesel maybe or something, not these, perfect waterfall machines that give you good skip, but I got a kind of a skip and an air. So I was kind of my boat in the air as I started to leave the lip of the waterfall. And as I left the lip of the waterfall, I kind of bucked bottom of my boat, but I had my elbow and arm off the side of the boat, which I clipped kind of the lip of the waterfall with my elbow, um, and which sent
Mm.
me, catapulting forward, landed on my face, broke my paddle, got ejected out of my boat, swam up to the surface, and thankfully, a guy named Vincent DuPont was there doing safety to kind of him and Steve Fisher pull me out of the water. And when I kind of sat up, I was like, okay, I think I'm okay. And then I could bend my arm. I brought my arm up to like wipe the water from my face, but when I went to like straighten out my arm. My arm didn't straighten out again. I was like, wow, something feels totally wrong. And I looked down, and the ulcer on like the tip of my elbow had been broken into two pieces, and one piece sitting up kind of in my tricep zone. So that was a second big surgery. It was actually two big surgeries. I had one a metal plate and five screws put in, and then a month after that, that taken out and replaced with a little bit of wire. So I guess my left arm there, a shoulder and an elbow, and the crazy thing about it was those incidences. I had my surgery for my shoulder on September 3rd, and then 3 years to the date later, on September 3rd, I shattered my elbow and went in for surgery. So my new rule of
No
thumb is
way.
on September 3rd, I don't go kayaking that day. That's to sit at home
Yeah,
and
it's a good day to stay home.
sit on the patio and enjoy watching other people paddle by in front of the house.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You don't even get on flat water that day.
no, exactly. So yeah, those were the two kind of big gnarlies of, I guess, my career to date. I guess the positive with those ones was that I put my time to good use. Where my shoulder, I wrote a guidebook called Foodalafu Whitewater. I wrote a small guidebook on the Foodalafu, all the rapids and the surf spots and stuff. And then with my elbow there was kind of led me into writing that whitewater chili book as well. And then I kind of learned a whole lot about, how to rehab and how to go to the gym and what kind of weights we should be lifting and all that kind of fun stuff, which I think in turn allowed me to stay in fairly good shape and prolong my paddling to the point where I can still paddle and don't really deal with any sore back or sore neck or sore shoulders or, weakness or anything at this point still. So some positives from the negative.
Yeah. That's a great way to, a lot of people sometimes will go into like little mini depressions or, fall into, you know, the drink or just, whatever. But that's great that you were able to channel those things into things that were super productive.
Yeah.
How many world championships did you appear in?
Well, I think my first one was in 1999. So I did World at Full James, New Zealand, and then 2001 I missed out on that because of my shoulder. Three, I went to Graz. I believe that was Graz. Yeah, hung out there a lot with Jake and Cade. I placed a top 10 in that one, so I was pretty happy. And then 2005 would have been Australia Penrith, but I'd just come off of elbow surgery, so I was paddling at that point, but I wasn't able to do the team qualifiers the year before, and it wasn't really in my interest to go and sit in a hot eddy with everybody else in the world at that point when I'm just getting back to kayaking. Then what did I do? I guess I did 2000 and would be the next one. 2007 was, yeah. I'm having a hard time putting together the time frame, but I've pretty much done every worlds up until 2015 was the first one I missed. I had my first kid in 2015, so I missed the one that was back on the Ottawa River on Carburetor. I guess 2007 was on the bus seater on the Ottawa, and I placed a fifth at that one. That was probably maybe even another actually flood or bad karma in my life. I actually in the finals there on my second ride, I believe, I went out there and curled my bow underneath the water and snapped the tow on rope. So that wasn't so very fun to deal with. That kind of blew my mental my mental game. But yeah, I've done worlds for a bunch of years from 2000 and I think 2009 and 2011. I competed for Norway because
Okay.
I was in Norway coaching the national freestyle kayak team and then a junior development program. I paddled for those guys a bunch, and then 2013 I transferred back to Canada to compete at NOC for Team Canada again, and then after that I kind of, I guess, maybe lost my mojo for wanting to go and compete at the world kind of stage at that point. We'll see. There's maybe a return in the future. We'll see.
I was just saying now, they have the Masters division. I mean, you're probably
Yeah.
still good enough. You don't need that, but I'm pointing towards next summer, maybe going to Spain to compete in the old guy.
Yeah, nice. Well, maybe we'll have to do a rendezvous there for sure. Like I've been going to most of the Canadian national selections every year to go compete there and doing quite well. Like I won in 2000 and was it maybe 2019, I think, or 2021? 2021, I won the national championships there. And I don't know, I wasn't so much doing it because I wanted to go compete at the Worlds, but more or less just trying to encourage more of the Canadian paddlers to support and get involved and go compete. Like I think there's definitely, we've always had kind of a strong Canadian showing, but there's definitely been less and less interest in competing on the national stage over kind of the last, I'd say, 5 to 8 years. So I've really been, along with one of my good buddies there, Mr. Matt Hamilton, who's always the one to show up too. So we've been pretty good to show up and at least make the youngsters work a little harder to make the Canadian national team, or at least motivate them a little bit more.
And just a couple weekends ago, I had a blast from the past. Speaking of older Canadian paddlers who are still doing it, Scott Findell was down there in Columbus, or he's at Montgomery and then Columbus, and hadn't seen him in over 20 years. And he said he's still competing a little bit and was on the Canadian team last year.
Yeah, heck yeah. It's funny. I keep running into all those guys too. It's funny. All of us old guys have now actually committed to like the small investment of buying a carbon boat. So it's like all of all of the past, present, and the future all combined now and seeing one another paddling carbon boats on the Ottawa River, which is pretty fun.
Let's eddy out and take a quick break. Do you need a break from the cold of a North American winter? Then let's head south to the best whitewater on earth at Pucon Kayak Retreat. Email me at bflowkayak@gmail.com to learn more about how you can take the ultimate paddling adventure in the heart of Chile. Now let's peel out and head downstream.
That's awesome. Now I want to get into flow advice, and I want you to think about two groups of people. And I know you, and I appreciate you being a fan of the show, so you know this question. It's a new paddler and an older person who took time off and returning to the sport. What advice would you have for those two groups of people?
Yeah, I guess for the newer paddler, I think as a newer paddler, like I've been teaching a lot of kayaking here the last bunch of summers going back and teaching newer kayakers as well. But I think there's this kind of, I don't really want to call it fear, but a hesitation from a lot of people, like the nervousness of kayaking. And I think that if people just really realize how welcoming that the kayaking world is, like it's not what it used to be, where if you miss the wave trying to peel out onto it, people are going to harass you and send you to the back of the line and shun you that you shouldn't be there. But people are going to be really, really supportive. We're all out there for the exact same reason. The industry is dependent upon more people getting involved. So why not? Like it's a crazy, amazing environment that you can push your comfort zone to whatever kind of level that you want. You can, if you're totally nervous, you can, go play around in small little eddy lines. I try to tell newbies to be more of a child when you go out there. Like, don't be afraid to, you don't have to sit in your kayak floating around in the eddy the whole time. Like, hop out of your boat and go swim in and swim down the rapid, or go take a little swim in the eddy line, or to start to desensitize yourself to the whitewater, because it's definitely a scary thing. But if you can keep yourself sort of on the edge of your comfort level, then you can certainly learn a lot faster. I think there's definitely that fine line between pushing yourself beyond your ability level and maybe giving yourself a scare or an injury or whatever. But I think if you can sort of reel it in to know where your limitations are, but always willing to kind of test them a little bit, I think you can go real far in kayaking. So that's kind of the newbie. Just realize that everybody's welcoming. You know what I mean? There's nobody that's going to shun you, or nobody that's not going to appreciate you being out there. You're going to get way more help
What
than
about the old guy
what you could
returning?
possibly imagine. Yeah, the old guy returning. It's like I think we need to kind of realize that we're not as probably agile as we once were. But I'd say maybe treat yourself to a new piece of gear. That's always pretty amazing. Like, whether it be a new helmet or a new life jacket or a new paddle, like some of the new paddles nowadays are pretty fantastic. But I think it's just to take the opportunity to enjoy the little moments. Um, we get pretty focused on like trying to learn and try to get better, and you know if you can just take a big deep breath and hit the time out or the pause button there and really enjoy just the moment that you're in. I think we're all pretty lucky that we get to enjoy this flowing water out on the river, and that we just kind of need to take it in and realize how lucky that we are. So yeah, for somebody kind of returning to it, I think it's a good way to reignite some of those old amazing fun memories, but also create some new ones. Don't get really stuck on what it used to be and how you used to be, but just that you should be stoked to get back into a boat, and there's probably going to be a lot of people out there waiting to give you some high fives and welcome you back into the whitewater world.
For sure. Yeah. I have definitely found that since I've been back. And for anybody out there, I know I had like Keith Lyles and some other old guys on there who are like, kind of getting back into it. And you've never really left, but for other people, like get back into it. It's so rewarding, so fun. And the
Yeah,
community's even more
yeah, it certainly
amazing
is.
and welcoming than it was.
Yeah, I think like the one, I'm probably tainted because I come from, my background is the Ottawa River, which is spoils people, but like I see a lot of people that maybe return back into the whitewater world that haven't been in it for a while. They're hesitant to be upside down. Like, people don't want to be upside down. They don't want to flip, and I think that's probably the one thing that's like really holding a lot of returning paddlers, is that not wanting to be upside down. So, I mean, take the time to do some rolls in the eddy, before you paddle out there. Um, when it's deep enough, like the Ottawa River's deep everywhere, but on your home rivers, with the places where it's deep, why not go for a roll? Why not try a back deck roll off of a wave and fall in your face? Because it's fun. And well, that's probably the best way we're going to learn things, is trial and error. So just get after it.
Yeah, I like that. Just get after it. Now, this is kind of like advice, but this is a segment sponsored by our friends at the Pucon Kayak Retreat, and this is the pro hot tip. So, if you could give
Oh, hot
somebody a
tip.
pro hot tip who maybe is like a pretty proficient paddler, but now they really want to get into play boating or freestyle, what would be your pro hot tip from Tyler Curtis on how somebody can be more proficient in freestyle kayaking?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is have a goal set. Like, every time that you go out, if you're really focused on becoming better, and you know what I mean, you want to, whether it be competing or whatever, but if you always want to continue to progress in your own personal paddling, it's like you have to have some sort of goal set. Like, you have to. It's really easy for us, and I'm one of the worst at it too, is just go out there and lead off with doing a couple of the tricks that you already know. The line's kind of long. There's too many people out there. I'll just go do the stuff that I know and have fun. It's like, but have a goal, whether that's maybe you want three kind of goals. You want what do I want to accomplish this season, or what do I want to improve on? What am I going to kind of focus on this month or this trip that I'm on? And then maybe what am I going to focus on this paddling session? I think is kind of key, because that way you kind of see and you get rewarded in your sort of progression. And I think one of the other really good things to do is in Swedish we say utvärdera, but kind of do a bit of a diagnostic at the end of the day. Like review your day with somebody, go over like, what'd you do today? Did you try any new tricks or whatever? And just a simple 2 to 5 minute conversation with the person you're out there paddling with. I think it's going to create a lot of really good memories that maybe you just overlooked while you're out there, but also B, it gives each person kind of the opportunity to give a little feedback to one another and learn from one another. So just that kind of like end of the day breakdown, or review of the day, I think is kind of key. And most of the time, usually we're in the parking lot anyways, but it's usually random conversations about social media or whatever else in the world. But take up the conversation, or be the one to be like, hey man, like what did you learn today? Or hey, what was your highlight? What was your highlight moment of the day? Or what was your light bulb moment today? What did you learn the most? And I think you'll be pretty surprised that people are pretty stoked to talk about their day.
Very cool. Well, are you ready to run some rapids with me?
I would love to. Do I need a life jacket and helmet?
And a spray skirt, but yeah. So hopefully we'll get to run some rapids for real someday soon. But in the meantime, we're gonna run the rapid fire segment here. So I'm gonna throw out a topic, and some of my international guests, sometimes I have to explain what Mount Rushmore is. But like your top, your top five, top four, whatever you think is like the greatest of all time of these categories. Okay.
Okay. All right. I like it.
All right. Kayak designs of all time.
Oof. Kayak designs of all time. Yeah. Okay. Kayak designs of all time. I'm gonna have to go with um, the ZG. That thing was, yeah, I don't even know if I want to say it's like ahead of its time, but it was, it had the hull, it had the speed, it had kind of the precision and the well balanced. Like that thing was I guess because I kind of went from paddling maybe like with transformers and easies and all that kind of stuff that were a little bit more sluggish, but to get in something that would felt like that was kind of the first time I stepped into a boat and felt like I was in some sort of F1 or some sort of full on race car kind of sport mobile. So that's definitely number one. Um, the other one I think was earlier to that, was like the Whip It Whiplash.
Oh yeah.
I think was pretty amazing. I did a trip, straight out of high school with a Whip It down to Honduras in South America, and I ran rivers in it. I plunged off some waterfalls, and I surfed, and I stern squirted, and I cartwheeled, and I think that thing opened up a whole world of freestyle when people started to get into sort of linking ends and cartwheeling. That thing was fantastic. So yeah, the Whip It, and the bigger version was the Whiplash. And the latest, one of the latest and greatest, I guess, the biggest one is just the fact that we now make playboats in carbon. So I'm gonna have to say like a Dreamboat design, a Dreamboat design Rockstar V, a Rockstar 5 in carbon. Steven is a wizard, and he's actually. I've always found that I'm way a little bit more than a lot of the pro paddlers who are paddling medium boats. So I've always been on the kind of the high end of the medium, sitting a little bit low, but I'm not big enough to paddle a large. So Steven was really nice to take a Rockstar medium and add a quarter of an inch the whole way around the boat to make it float just a little bit higher. So now I have a boat, the perfect boat built for my perfect weight. So
Hmm,
that's the number one um, fun toy for me right now.
that's amazing. What about rivers of all time?
Can I include my home river?
Of course, you can be
uh,
as biased as you
I
want.
guess, yeah. Like you know what I mean? I've traveled the world. I've paddled in over 35 countries, and the Ottawa River, it just always has something to offer. And I don't know if it's just the river itself, but the whole community and the fact that any day on the Ottawa River in the middle of the summer, you can go out there and meet amazing people from all generations of paddling. So I'd have to say that the Ottawa River is definitely up there as one of the top three. The Foo, of course, if you haven't been there, then you're crazy. You need to go.
Gotta
It's
go.
one place you kind of just you gotta go. Um, I think the Socha River is pretty fantastic. Like just the color of the water. It's got a lot of cool continuous white water that's pretty amazing. So that's up there. And then I probably have maybe, I don't know, I can do maybe two more. I guess that I don't want to kind of take those like big normals that everybody like. You can say the Zambezi, or you could say like the White Nile before it was dammed, but that kind of seems like a little bit cheating. So I'm gonna highlight the Shua River in Norway, which is a little destination river, but it's got some fantastic white water. It's got some short sections, some long sections. It's got play boating. It's got hardcore rapids on it. It's a really good one for just all around paddling of all abilities and all water levels. So I think that's another one to name. And then yeah, I guess I can kind of those ones are kind of my highlights. There's a whole bunch in the South Island of Chile that you could, or the South Island of New Zealand that I could name, but I think I can leave those ones out for now.
Speaking of, you've been to 35 different countries, so you'd be one to speak on this. If you could only paddle or if you had to narrow it down to your top 4 or 5 countries to paddle in, what would they be?
Yeah, I think Canada is a big one for sure. Like it's such an enormous country. You have, on the far coast there, we got Skookumchuck Narrows, and then you got crazy amounts of creeking throughout British Columbia. You got some amazing surf spots there as well, and some man-made sections. You got pushing into kind of Winnipeg and stuff, you got like white mud, and you got some big rapids outside of Winnipeg. You got the whole north shore of Lake Superior up by Thunder Bay. That's fantastic. You got the Ottawa River, the Gatineau River, which is big volume, and then for those that haven't explored Quebec, I think you could probably spend a whole lifetime on your own just exploring the whitewater that Quebec has to offer. So Canada's definitely I think Norway is a big one. I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time paddling in Norway. I've paddled most stuff in Norway. There's a few kind of biggies that I haven't checked off yet, but it's pretty fun. But I now live on the other side of the border. I live in Sweden, and Sweden actually has some pretty legit whitewater that not too many people have paddled or really even heard of. So I might actually even have to lift Sweden um, as a top place to kind of get to go and go kayaking. Um, and then I think I'm in Chile. You can't really beat that one either. As far as going to paddling places, it's it's pretty amazing as well.
All right, kayakers of all time. Oh,
You
I
got
can
one more?
I can name bomb one more too that we there's
Yeah.
like the Saipan Don area in Laos that's got some pretty incredible whitewater that's just being explored. You know, I know we were probably one of the first groups to go into there like way back in the day. But I think there's been more and more and more groups in there and more development. So that area is, I think, for people that are into like the kind of exploration and a little bit tougher going and living and stuff. Yeah, the Saipan Don area in Laos is pretty epic.
You know, China and then Southeast Asia has got to be one of the places that has to offer the most potential first ascents that are still.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I spend a group of us were in Tibet. We spent what I think just about a month paddling around in Tibet, which was, you know, mind-boggling to be driving along on a road and look down at these rivers and you think they're just kind of boulder gardeny rapids, and then you actually get down into them and the boulders are the size of, you know, small apartment buildings, and then paddling at, you know what I mean, 5,000, 4,500 meters above sea level, where, you know, making it from one eddy to the next one, you're totally gassed and or having problems breathing is a whole other game to kind of paddling. Um, so yeah, Tibet is a pretty cool one just to be paddling around and surrounded, looking up at the Himalayas and like is pretty impressive.
All right, so the next one on the Mount Rushmore segment, the rapid segment, is kayakers of all time. Can be a little controversial, but who would be your top 4 or 5 paddlers of all time?
Yeah, man, I could name drop all day, but I'm gonna go a little bit outside of the probably the norms here a little bit. I'm gonna name Paul Harwood, who is a pretty fantastic paddler. There's probably not a ton of people that have heard of him, but he's the guy that surfed the bus eater for the very first time, and he actually did it in a squirt boat. So that guy's all time, and he still paddles a ton. He still paddles a ton today. So Paul Harwood's legend. Um, Claude Pajot. He was the one person, I guess, that gave me the biggest awe in my entire life. I saw a video of him when we were still firing around and doing cartwheels. I saw video footage of him, and I think it was a Riot Hammer on Pyramid Wave on the Lachine Rapids in Montreal, and he was carving back and forth like this amazing style, and he just turned sideways on the wave and slid down the wave sideways. And that was kind of like this holy wow, I can't even believe you can do that. So he was, I think, one of the first guys to bring in really aggressive, stylish kind of wave surfing, Claude Pajot. The other one I kind of have to mention is Steve Fisher. Like I spent a ton of time paddling with him. A great dude. He's done so much for bringing recognition to kayaking, like in the big media mainstream. Um,
Yeah.
the Kern brothers, the Kern brothers. I grew up watching videos of those guys, and you know, good buddies with Johnny Kern. So the Kern brothers, another one kind of veering away from just kayaking, but like Alan Braswell, C1er,
Yeah.
who, you know, I think he's one of the original OGs of like slaying ends and loops and all this stuff where we didn't really realize it was possible in a C1. And from what I hear, he still gets out and
Yeah.
paddles, so that's pretty awesome. And then I'm gonna keep name bombing here, but I got like young guns who have done a lot for everything. I think they re-energized a whole generation of kayakers to get up off the couch and get back after it, or the people that were getting lazy and complacent started to push their ability levels a little bit more. And then I got like kind of the ladies of, you know, that the ladies that were there from kind of the beginnings pushing things, the Jamie Simons and the Shannon Carrolls who were, you know, freestyling with the and putting the boys to shame and dropping the big drops as well. And then somebody like Noria Newman, who is in my opinion, probably one of the best kayakers in the world right now. Man and woman. She's amazing to watch, and just her positive attitude is amazing.
Yeah, I agree. It's been.
So that's a pretty
I love now that
that's
there's
a
such
pretty big rush.
high
That's a
quality
pretty
stuff.
big Rushmore.
Yeah, we would need to move the Mount Rushmore to the Himalayas for that list. But I mean, when you start naming
Yeah,
names, it's just like, how do you not include some of those people, right?
yeah. I gotta send out some props. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. I mean, you could make. I mean, you would be up there for sure as well. I know
Somebody.
you
My
wouldn't be
thought is.
yourself.
You're exactly. My thought is that somebody actually maybe needs to do a video at some stage. Maybe we can push Mr. Russ Sturges to do a video on kind of like the history of whitewater kayak, or like the history of freestyle that kind of goes through the boat change, and you know what I mean, like from the early days of exploring the Stikine and this all these like first big descents in these crazy long glass boats to today's young guns. Would be pretty amazing to
Yeah,
watch, I think.
I'm hoping to take the in talks with a couple of publishers right now. I'm hoping to take the stories and the rankings and just kind of everything from the podcast. I'm gonna maybe wait till it's about 2 years in and compile it into a book. So I think that would be cool.
Love it. I love it.
All right. So the last question I have for you is our no, I got one more before we get to final flow. A river that you've never done that you want to do. So like top on your bucket list.
Ooh, yeah, I think there's still always have this keep coming back to this conversation. I've never been down the Stikine. I've always just been
Really?
bunkered down on the Ottawa River, or I've been traveling, competing, or whatever. And the Stikine just seems like one that I really need to get onto. I don't think that my like window is closed yet. I probably have a couple years yet to do it, but I'm hoping at some point in the near future I can get onto the telephone with Mr. Benny Marr there and have him drag me down the Stikine.
There you go. All right. So final flow. You've got 1 day left in a kayak. The good news is you get to be any age. So you get to be in your prime. Most people would choose their prime. I don't know, maybe you wouldn't, but you could be any age. You get to be in any boat, on any river, with any crew. What would it be?
Oh man, wowzers. Uh, yeah, I don't know if I'd go back to my prime. I lived that and it was
Okay.
awesome, but I'm not sure I would go back there. I'd probably, I probably could almost say that I maybe had that day this past summer actually, and I would repeat it again. I had a day on the
Okay.
Ottawa River. It was like this big reunion at the rafting company, a 50-year reunion. And I had all of my buddies that I paddled with from kind of the beginning when we were like 15, 16, 17 years old. We were called the Nates. So it was like James Roddick, yeah, like James Roddick, Shane Naismith, and Liam Mark, and myself, and we all kind of got together this summer, and we hadn't seen each other, as a group for probably 20 years. So we all jumped into kayaks and some archaic gear and threw on some sunblock and just cruised ourselves down the Ottawa River, surfing and laughing and giggling about the old times. So I think I would probably like to repeat that again if I had to, if that was my last day of kayaking. And I might even
Very
invite
cool.
in maybe one or two more extra sort of recent friends or as well.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, it's been super cool catching up. I mean, I don't know when the last time we've seen each other. Maybe I'm thinking like the IR Triple Crown days, maybe the early 2000s, at least in person. But the beauty of social media, right? We can stay in touch with each other's lives through that way. But thanks again for continuing to push the sport and being so involved. And I know you've impacted so many people in the sport. And thanks for your time to coming on B-Flow Sessions.
Love it, Brad. Thanks super much for having me. Looking forward to listening to future podcasts here and hearing what the rest of the kayaking world is up to. So we'll definitely see you on social media, and hopefully we get to do some paddle strokes here, float around in an eddy together soon.
That'd be super cool. Thanks again, Tyler.
Right on. Coolio.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of B-Flow Sessions, where we explore how paddlers find their flow on the water and in life. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a rating, or share it with a friend. It truly helps us grow the community. And a huge thank you to Pucon Kayak Retreat for sponsoring today's episode. If you're ready for a world-class Chilean whitewater adventure, email me at bflowkayak@gmail.com and I'll help you get dialed in. Until next time, keep finding your flow.